I should just hold it on that because I don't want to spoil this scene with me. Just look at the bows. And it's a beautiful rainy day in northern Michigan. Seasonal. Leaves are starting to come down, although they're kind of slow. Update is that we've been getting basically crushed with visitors, which is a good thing, but we're managing to like instruct them and like not terrifying the turkeys and the deer and the other wildlife, so it's working out. Caught some people crossing into a protected area yesterday, but I stopped them. Maintaining a healthy protected area. Anyway, rain. It rains in places sometimes. It rains in places where people made sinew-backed bows. In rain, you can like ease the pain that sinew-backed bows feel in humid or rainy weather. You can ease it. But there's another alternative. I would hearken you to, if you have the first 3 volumes of the traditional Bowyer's Bibles. I don't have the 4th one. I've heard various things regarding that. I'm perfectly happy with the first 3. Unfortunately, I can't open it to the page because I loaned mine out last year and just kind of forgot to retrieve it. But regardless, I remember it pretty well because I've read them cover to cover and then backwards and then through and again, like many of you have. And there is, not only on historic European bows and plains bows and probably Algonquin bows and other such topics, there is a good chapter on West Coast native bows and arrows. And of course, the typical bow that people think about would be a paddle bow sinew-backed. This one's reflexing nicely. It's my white cedar one, and it has a strip of, what's that stuff they get off of sheep? Besides sheep hair. Wool. Blue wool, which would be considered, say, a handle that was used, a hand grip, because it's, you know, it's gorgeous. It works. I believe that Ishi also used wool. Wool strips, let's say, wool, I'm getting myself into trouble here, strips of wool for hand grips on his bows. But you may or may not give a lot of credence to the paddle bows that were not sinew-backed. Rainy weather, what do? You're not going to pack it in and watch Netflix because there was no Netflix. There was no home entertainment as far as that goes like that. There was real entertainment. Oak. I remember looking back at the Bowyer's Bible, traditional Bowyer's Bible volume that I no longer have in my possession, but there was a series of bows, maybe vine maple if I remember correctly, oak, forget which kind of oak, paddle bows that people would have used when the weather was damp. And so they're multifaceted. This one does look a little weird because it's asymmetrical. It's a 50-inch bow. It can draw 25 inches. For a 50-inch self bow is pretty good. 45 pounds at 24 inches. And so I felt it necessary, felt it my duty to make it asymmetrical. Lower limb's a little stiffer, a little shorter than the upper limb. But that was just to sneak out the ability to make a very good self bow with the criteria of above 40 pounds at a remarkably long draw length for a self bow, half its length, which it's working out. I'm looking at it, and the tips are kind of cool. They're not my typical pin knocks. They actually kind of flare as they go out, and then there's kind of a chevron shape at the end. I remember a distinct paddle bow that is in the Bowyer's Bibles. It's oak, short like this, maybe even shorter, but the tips were incredibly recurved. It gets visualized going from paddly shape to thin. It narrows, and then it almost has a curly cue at the end, which I'm thinking that if I wasn't sending this off to Bob, I forget where Bob lives, I haven't received the info yet, but if I wasn't sending this off, I would narrow these tips, which I can get away with because it thickens a little bit, and I would attempt to curly cue it. And you're thinking, well, that recurve will pull out. Well, actually not. If I was to have a deflex reflex bow, non-contact. You see on this little recurve, this little flare, string is not making contact. Then the tendency might be when you're drawing it for that recurve to pull out. But if you have a curly cue where throughout the draw that string is lined snugly against that curly cue, it's a design feature, not necessarily a function feature, then it's not going to have that tendency to pull out because that string has very little leverage, so you can get away with having a curly cue recurve there. And that's when I get a chance. I've got so many bows backed up. I'm going to do another one of these. And oh, I love it because you're not following one growth ring. Obviously, you do not need to if it's tailored and designed according to your plan correctly. Because 50-inch bow, 25-inch draw. I'm saying that you do not need to follow one growth ring on it, and neither did they, because they showed the rings on the back and I believe on the belly on these bows. That whoever did the sketches of these actual bows, they showed the growth ring patterns, and some of them were hugely violated, and they worked out. Now for that, I guess I'll do a little bit about the handle. The handle is rawhide. It's rawhide and it's unsanded, so it's full thickness of a white-tailed deer. And so when I'm doing this, stitching, if you're rawhide stitchers, instead of having, it curls around and then here's the end, like this. I did not want to have a seam that stuck out for comfort and also aesthetics. And so when I was stitching it, it's like this. And it's no harder than stitching like this. You just, run your needle a certain orientation as you're going through the holes that you poked into the rawhide previous to shrinking, soaking, with your awl into a soft piece of cedar or something. You orient it like this. Another fine point. People typically either have the seams running straight down or off to the side. Well, because this has a distinct orientation, there's an upper limb and a lower limb, and your hand, if you're right-handed, Bob is right-handed, I'm assuming, I'm playing the odds here, I wanted to have the seam somewhat askew, so when you're holding it, your hand is not making contact with that seam except where the thumb is, and it's in a certain spot where this is, and so that seam is not affecting the feeling on that grip as if it was center, where it might be bunching up under my hand, or on the back where it'd be like in the web, or on the side where it would definitely be in there. It's askew. It's backed up over to the side, so it's not affecting it. Now, after I stitched it with backstrap tendons, sinew, there's no artificial stuff except for the string here, B50, that has 2 strands of yellow and mixed with 12 strands of black. This is all natural. Now sometimes the rawhide will separate on the ends because it's under a lot of stress. Even though I made my pattern with just a piece of paper around there, transferred that pattern to a piece of cardstock so I'd be able to trace it around on the rawhide, it shrunk plenty. And even during the shrinking process, I would squeeze it like that, get it down there. So it's snug. Should I have put some hide glue or some... forget Type-On, all natural. Should I have rubbed hide glue on the bow and on the inside of the rawhide? Yes, I probably should have. I didn't, but it shrunk down enough to be grippy. And also, the sinew that I wrapped around the ends to basically cover up where it separated a little bit at the end, because there's not a whole lot of ability for that sinew, or if you use artificial sinew, to bind those when it shrinks. That'll grip it down even further. I might just grease over that because it's damp, it's not sticky, because your hand is not making constant contact with that. And even if it does, the stickiness isn't going to hurt anything, but a little bit of grease over that will help. Or wax, the same stuff that I put on here. I might just re-wax and grease the whole bow and then just kind of rub it over that a little bit, maybe even over the rawhide. Grease does not loosen rawhide. I do that on my drum heads. I've got drum heads that I've made out of rawhide. I grease them, and it does not loosen it. Grease is compatible with sinew, not the glue. You have to have it finished and glued. But grease over top rawhide and sinew does not loosen it, does not make it shrink or stretch. It maybe even crispifies it in some weird way. But yeah. Stitching with sinew, backstrap. I don't use backstrap for backing or tip wraps or anything. I save my back straps because I don't get too many because they're typically pretty expensive. And I go through a lot of tendons, so I can't just use any that I harvest. I have to buy them. My backstrap sinew is dedicated, if I have enough, for bowstrings and sewing because it's long enough to do that. You know, whitetail backstrap is about this long, elk maybe a little longer. And so you may have to join two threads to do a handle, but that's no big deal. You're wondering, do I wet my sinew when I stitch it? Well, I don't. It'll get a little damp and maybe shrink a little bit, you know, just from that wet rawhide. But I stitch with dry sinew. That first knot, because if it gets wet, you can't really knot it that well because it just slides right through. It's lubricated. I will do like a slip thing. I'll go around like a timber hitch. You know how you have a line, and then you loop it around the main line, because this is the long section right here. You loop it around, and then you twist it upon itself to form a loop. That is a very, very good method of starting that. Instead of tying a knot, you do a timber hitch and a choking kind of a knot. But think it through. Oh, you're asking, why don't I do a lot of political statements and stuff? Well, you know, there's enough people doing that. I will say, primitive archery takes us to a place where people functioned and lived in an environment where if they didn't do for themselves, they weren't able to do. There was none of this, I need a safe space. And I'm not referring to anything in particular. I need a safe space. Life isn't fair. I don't want to have to worry about myself. I want other people to do for me. That type of thinking does not exist in our world. I think it would be rare to find somebody into primitive archery and hunting, for that matter, that has the attitude that the world owes them a living. And I don't feel that way. I'm assuming you don't either, and so that's my political speech. Now on to a story. I'm a little lucky here because yesterday we were crushed. It was good weather. Now it's rainy. Somehow I've evolved into like looking forward to bad weather because I get a little time unto myself. A story. Whole bunch of people. A group of people. And that bunch might mean 5. It might mean 20. It might mean 200. Depends. And so we're thinking, we're understanding, we're acknowledging that the basic building block of our existence is the earth. It's the stone that makes up the earth. You can't say one thing is more important than the other, you know, stone, animal, vegetable. But the foundation level is the stone that the earth is made up of. And so working with stone, whether or not it's making your cutting tools, your wood shaping tools, your butchering tools, other tools. And so this group of people, they understand that they're not just going to go around and they're not going to sleep on the ground and hope that the weather is good. They're going to understand how to make fire. They're going to understand how to use shelter. They're going to understand that to surpass fundamental living of just scavenging and sleeping on the ground, they need to understand the rocks and how rocks benefit them, the stone. And so this group of people, they sat down one day and they looked around and they were not able to find a large stone, not so large you can't carry it, but large enough to, and I'll get to this, large enough to move around. I'm getting into it now. Large enough that if it's heated, it will stay warm. That's important, a heat mass. They understand the bigger the rock, if you heat it, the longer it'll stay hot. And so they're going to sit around and they're going to take turns taking another hard round rock, banging it in the center. Bang, 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 bang. It's called pecking. There's flaking, there's pecking. And so they're going to create in this large rock that's able to be carried, even if it takes 5 people, carry it, heat mask. They're going to take this large stone and they're going to create a pocket in it. They're going to create a bowl. And this bowl is going to serve a variety of uses. You might be able to, you can cook in it. You know, you get it hot, it stays hot. You don't have to watch it all night, because once you get that hot, it's going to stay hot for hours and hours, maybe days if it's a big enough stone. So you've got a pocket that you can cook in. You can maybe boil water by taking other rocks and putting it in there from the fire and, you know, heating it that way. You're also going to be able to make glue, which is an important thing. Now, I wasn't there. I don't know. I don't know how it works, but I can imagine that if I was back there and I understood glue, maybe you took butchering, you threw some tendons down there. They're too chewy to eat. When they dried, they stuck to the ground in which they dried upon. And it's like, huh. Peel them, wrap them, they self-glue. Maybe we can do something with that. So they're going to grind it in their pocket in their rock. Make some smaller fibers enough. Put some water in there. Heat that rock over or next to a fire. Get it hot, and it's going to stay hot for a while. And those fibers, or the powder that they produce from those fibers by grinding it in their little pocket, are going to dissolve and turn into like a gelatin after they wake up and the rock is cooled. Wow. And it's sticky. Maybe that's where glue came from. And then from there, you know, they're using glue technology. So that's my story about how glue came to be. There's a car in. I need to talk to my customers. Thank you for bearing with me. Time to get to work. Have a great day, everyone.